podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Bjork, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Bjork and A.W. Schultz.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Factory of the Future. I'm here today with A.W. Schultz. I'm Alexandria Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about all things sustainability. We'll be covering what the cornerstones of sustainability are, who's playing nice and not so nice, so who are our greenwashers out there. We're going to talk a little bit about what is driving sustainability choices in companies, and then we'll wrap it up with what we would think could be done to make this earth a little bit cleaner and make the products a little bit better for people. So I'm going to kick it off with what are the cornerstones of sustainability? When we think about sustainability, we think about what are the raw materials in terms of products that go into creating that product, the packaging, and kind of any actual physical component that is used to either make or deliver and package up the product, right? So the product itself and what it comes in. And then, the second cornerstone is the people piece. So everybody could think back to like the child labor scandal and all of those types of things. Like, how does a company treat its people? What are the benefits they provide? How are they working within their organization to promote diversity and just a good working environment for everybody? So raw materials, people, and then the third, which is what everyone I think kind of thinks of when they think of sustainability, is the impact on the environment. So when we think about the impact on the environment, we're talking about where are these materials coming from? What are the materials? Once the materials are used, how can they be recycled? So we've talked on the show before about closed loop manufacturing and all of those different things. That all fits into that third bucket of the impact on the environment. So that's kind of framing up our conversation today about sustainability. And I think that there's companies that are doing it out of necessity, and then there's companies that are doing it because it's their core values. There's other companies that are doing it because they're just kind of following whatever the political requirements or political agenda is. So AW, why don't you talk a little bit about our not so nice folks who are fitting into this bucket of greenwashing? So take us there.
Well, when we look at, what is greenwashing? And for those that are new to the term, or maybe just to be educated in what it is, it's about misleading your customers. It's about giving a false claim about your environmental responsibility to the practices that you have that are actually more harmful than what you're actually projecting. A couple examples that I pulled together, and some of these you probably have heard about, but what you may not understand is how impacted they had to the environment. Not necessarily deceiving their customers, but the long-term effects that their harm could have on it. The first one is the big, we'll go to number one, is, Volkswagen back in 2015. Now, for those of you that may or may not remember, they were promoting something that they called clean diesel. And this had to do with their fake emissions tests that they were doing, that they had incorporating a device in their vehicles that, when tested, it would cause the vehicle to go into call it environmental mode, that showed lower emissions than what was actually occurring on a regular day-to-day issue. Now, this problem was, well, it was all through the organization. So it got bypassed by many of those that were in making decisions. And, once found out, there was no, I guess, denying it. And it went to trial, it went to court, ended up a settlement of up to or around $30 billion. The car company was fined for these fake allegations. And well, I'd argue that Volkswagen is still is to the day doing just fine. But it really put a I use a pong just tapping the brakes a little bit on everyone else out there that you just can't make these false claims or create a false reality of what your end customer thinks that they're getting.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that's intentional deceit.
It
That is
was.
it was a complete intentional deceit. And it was a product that was designed to create false reads. So I just want to add that in before we keep going on the other examples. I think that to me is like the worst level of greenwashing there possibly is.
It was, and it affected a lot of people's jobs all the way up to the CEO, who was later stepped down from his position. The second example is, H&M. And I feel comfortable using these names because they there was quite a bit of excitement around to what they have. This one goes back to 2000, but relatively recent, 2022.
Mm,
And they were promoting a conscious collection of garments or clothing lines that were more environmental friendly. Now, that's great. The problem they had is that later we find out that 60% of the fabrics being used was synthetic fibers, which, for those we don't know, are polymers, which are
plastics.
plastics, which comes from the environment, which are hard to break down over time, which doesn't correspond with being green,
Sustainability. Yeah, and
sustainability.
it's bad for people too. Let's just be clear. When you're putting plastics on your body every day, all day, and sometimes in your most sensitive places, you're absorbing those plastics.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I'd argue I don't even know if there's even good data showing some of the long time
Yeah,
effects of it. But as we know, it's something that's
not good.
not good. Yeah. I want to touch on two more, and then I want to talk about your favorite topic, plastic, a little bit more. Is Shell and Exxon um, growing their you know basically taking a funded denial claim on the environmental impacts of their products, oil and gas, that they had out there, and the records show that they have been doing something like this in the 1970s. I mean, you can see today that they're trying to make more efforts to show that they're more green, um, but I I don't know. I mean, I've seen claims that oil and gas companies are. There was one that actually claims to be carbon neutral, which I don't know how is that possible based on the product that they create. But it also correlates with some of the airlines who try to offset their carbon footprint by um, funding dubious efforts on projects like tree planting
Yeah.
that correlate that, they're offsetting the environment by planting a lot of trees that, correlate that offset some of the
Yeah.
amounts of traveling goes. I think Alexander and I would probably agree. Like, I don't know how that's measured well, but I think that sure, it's a great um, aspirational effort, but is it really having as much impact as probably what they're promoting? I tend to I tend to be cautious when I think about that, and I added it to my list of what is greenwashing.
Yeah, yeah. I have a problem with sustainability reporting in general. Firstly, I'm very pro clean earth, very pro clean products, like very passionate about this, very anti-plastic in my personal choices, in everything I do. Um, but in learning a little bit more and kind of just having an interest and curiosity about sustainability, what I'm learning is, it's very easy for companies, like companies generally calculate their own sustainability measurements, like metrics. They are audited, like if you're a part of EcoVadis or you're EcoVadis certified, there's auditors and there's certain, standards that need to be met, which is a good thing. But if a company, especially a large company, and generally the companies that are privately held versus publicly traded, I think publicly traded companies have better sustainability practices and reporting procedures because they're upheld to that higher standard, right? Privately held companies, though, who aren't formally certified by an accredited membership can put out their own sustainability reports, which is great and a first step, right? But it's based on these calculations that are very arbitrary and very, if you think about just like how testing happens for certain medications or whatever, generally you would want a statistician who's not biased, right? But I think we all know in like drug administration, that's just not the case. Like there's definitely statisticians that are manipulating the data to suggest that this medication is more beneficial. I think the same thing happens in sustainability, where based on the way you calculate something, you could show that you're more sustainable this year than you were last year, without actually having changed very much, right? So that's sort of my problem. Then talking about the plastics piece, right? So I have a radical idea, and I think this would be good for the earth. I think this would be good for the environment and the ecosystem. But I think if companies want to put plastic out, that's fine. You do that. You do you. But you have to take twice as much out as you generate. I think that would really change the behavior of companies and it would give them a much stronger consideration on the plastic they put out and use. Like my face products are all packaged in glass. We can all agree glass is much better than plastic, although some glass does still have BPA, which is a fun fact for everybody. But yeah, so that's what I think we should be pushing for is if you want to put out plastic, you have to take twice as much out because for so many years, companies have been just putting plastic out into the earth, to the oceans, to these landfills, and they're not held responsible for the ramifications. I mean, that creates our water. So like we should all kind of be concerned about these landfills and plastics seeping into our water because we all know we're consuming microplastics even with the most purified best water there is available.
Alexander, I have to completely debate or disagree with you there. 100%, because these companies that are producing these plastics, they also recycle it. So what's the problem with that? They're recycling it,
Yeah,
recycling plastic.
recycling it to foreign countries and dumping it in their waterways.
That was my loaded question.
Yeah,
Truth be told, only about 9% of recycled products of plastic is actually recycled. The less of it, most of it actually ends up in landfills and, well, as we talked about, the ocean. The last example I have about greenwashing is a company that's known for being red, Coca-Cola, and pulling out myths about recycling efforts and being uh, what I kind of just loaded in to say is like, we recycle, we push recycling. But lo and be told that they are one of the highest producers of plastics per year. That is about 3 million pounds. I, I gotta recheck that. It could be tons or it could be pounds. I'm not sure.
trillion. It's got to be, it can't be because you think about Coca-Cola, it's on every continent, maybe except for Antarctica.
Yeah, no, I think it's there too. Um, but yeah, the false efforts. And I want to share a quick story before while I'm
Yeah,
still on the plastics. Oh, I had a job one time, and it wasn't my main job, but I was working for a company that made plastic bottles, and it wasn't the red one, but it was the other color.
blue.
And yeah, it was blue. Um, and In addition to my other job, I was also in charge of resource conservation. In this manufacturing facility, I always got the pleasure of receiving an award by the city of Dallas every year for my our company's outstanding effort of recycling plastic bottles. And we got the award because we recycled the most and anybody in the city. And at the time, I found myself very proud of that award. But when I more realized, like, how is, I didn't start understanding the problems with recycling bottles until I started asking the question, how do you recycle a bottle? And the easy answer is there's not an easy way. You can shred it up, but there's separations into it. The labor that goes
You
into
have to pull the
recycling it,
label off.
you have to pull the label off. Yeah, there's glue and adhesives to it.
Yeah.
Um, but I like sharing that story because it gave a false reaction that, even myself, I was part of greenwashing. I didn't even really know it.
Yeah. Well, when you generate the most plastics, you have a great opportunity to recycle the most plastics,
And
supposedly.
we had awards sitting up in our showcase when you came into the facility. I got
And
pictures of
that
myself holding it.
And that's what I mean about this reporting piece and the markers of success is I think we have a long way to go as a society to really hone in on what is sustainable and what, how do we measure that really across the board accurately and how do we take into consideration if you're not generating, like for example, the company that I buy my face products from, if they're not generating plastics, how are they going to even compete and get an award? There should be a no plastic used award, really, if we're going to get serious about that. I was actually thinking about a greenwashing campaign that's still going on today. So let's talk about Dawn and the BP spill, right? Dawn was like the rescuer of the
Those ducks.
cleaning the ducks, and the ducks are still in the Dawn commercials. But if you look at the Dawn plastic that contains the soap, I would have a probably 1 in or 3 in 10 chance of guessing that it's not recyclable or it's toxic. So there's this saying for consumers. So if you're a consumer, which everybody is, listen up. 135 stay alive. If because on each plastic item they have to put the number of, there's that triangle with the number in it. And I think there's up to like 13 different numbers that plastic can be. Only 1, 3, and 5 are like the least toxic plastics that could be used. So if your hair products, body products, water, Gatorade, whatever it is that you're consuming and even putting on your body and absorbing through your body's biggest organ are not contained in plastics that are 1, 3, or 5, then you are legitimately signing up for um, additional harm to your body beyond, just generally plastic as it is. So, um, that's kind of one of the ones that I think is a greenwashing frame that kind of gets overlooked or forgotten about.
This is a 5.
That's a 5, so you're good. You could stay alive.
Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed talking about this, and I realized I got paper, and I realized the top is plastic.
Oh, those are terrible for you. And actually, the cups, even though the paper, it's lined with bad stuff. Think wax or something. So,
It's not a practice. It was just
hey, I still do it occasionally. I'm just saying.
let's end on a good note that,
Okay.
let's not say, Debbie Downer on this. Um, I will say we're better than we were a few years ago.
Yeah. And I
And
think the consumers need to just demand it. Like stop buying plastic. Don't buy plastic Tupperware. Don't buy stuff that comes in plastic. You know, the consumers will create a demand that requires companies to be sustainable, and that's what we see at the consulting firm is that really companies that that weren't persuaded necessarily just because of their core values or because of their political or because of the political landscape are literally being forced by their consumers to uphold a different level of standard. So I agree.
Yeah, pushback is what it is. But I hate the fact that the recycling efforts, one, it takes longer, and it's not as convenient, and it costs more.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, that's if you can take the cost out of it, and maybe not solely the convenience of it, but just the accessibilities and making it, if you make it easier to recycle, it's certainly out there. And not plastic bottles, by the way, but because there's been efforts that you've got your trash and recycle, but I don't have a good foothold in that recycling. But I like your mindset. It's like if you're making plastics, you should have to pick up just as much plastic.
Well, and that's my opinion too, is I think hold the phone. Yeah, consumers should be making good choices, right? But let's not live in a dystopia where we think that like there's certain people who are uneducated and low income, right? They're busy working 60, 70 hours a week, 2 jobs to make it. They're the ones who are ending up using plastic the most, right? And they don't have the resources to afford higher end products that would come in glass or whatever. And I have a problem with these corporations that are capitalizing on very high margin items. They're choosing the less environmental friendly option because of cost and profitability. Why is this responsibility placed on the consumer? This responsibility should be just as much, if not more, on the generator, on the people that are creating the plastic. And I think that you would see a drastic reduction in plastic use as packaging if companies who produce and use plastic have to take twice as much out as they put out. And that's pretty measurable. It's very measurable, right? Like if you create 2 tons of plastic, you have to take 4 tons out. And either you do or you don't. There's no funny calculations going on about your CO2 emissions and all the other stuff.
Yeah, that is measurable.
Very measurable.
You're buying, and we can measure what you're pulling out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So if
company
anyone
out there
says
doing that, please
yeah.
reach out to us. I'd like to talk about that some more.
It's interesting too, because we had Ryan on from Pepsi and we didn't talk about this. I almost would wonder if he probably wouldn't be able to come back on and talk about the sustainability efforts. But we also have a guest that we're excited to have on, who comes from one of the companies that we were talking about today, which I wonder if that will change the guest appearance or not after this episode comes out. But I think it would be interesting to talk to one of these companies that we mentioned and see, what the individual stance is, because we also have to remember people are individuals, not just, the corporations that they work for. So that's kind of another reminder to people, is sometimes you can have your own personal values, and unfortunately you may work at a place that doesn't align with those. So hopefully you can sync those up too. But
that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Too. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is a good one. Okay. Well, I think we're clocking out here.
Like finished goods.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.